All right. Jim Rickards says Trump says no to world money. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Bullion Show. If you're new, please subscribe to the channel. Please like this video. Let's jump right into it. So, uh, Jim Rickards, in his Daily Reckoning website, has written that within the recent week, Trump has rejected what's known as paper gold. Now, what exactly is this paper gold that Trump has rejected? We know that politicians aren't a big fan of gold anymore, so we need to figure out, why he rejected this paper gold. And it's not necessarily the gold you may be thinking about. It's a special kind of gold. It is called an SDR. So for those of you who don't know, um, obviously with this recent crisis, there's been a lot of liquidity issues happening. So the IMF, International Monetary Fund, um, you know, posed a solution to help with some of this liquidity, with all these liquidity issues. One of them being to print a massive amount of SDRs. Now, for those of you who don't know what SDRs are, we'll get into that. But one of the reasons why Trump rejected and held up essentially the distribution of the SDRs for all of the IMF members is because, well, Steve Mnuchin actually said that most of it will actually go to countries that don't really need it. About 70% of it will go to countries like the US, countries like China, and Iran. Obviously, China and Iran are enemies of the US, but Mnuchin didn't word it that way. He said that it'll go to countries that don't necessarily need it, and a smaller portion of it will go to a smaller faction of countries who need it the most. Now, they are distributed by your drawing rights, or your voting rights, I should say, within the IMF. So if you have a lot of rights, then you're going to get a lot of SDRs. So take a look at how things were actually distributed in 2009 after the Great Recession. So if we scroll down, take a look at the United States. So during that period of time, we got a slew, probably the almost the lion's share of SDRs during that crisis. Take a look at what the United Kingdom got. Now take a look at what the UAE got in comparison. Take a look at what Turkmenistan got in comparison. Take a look at what Uganda got in comparison. Um, and let's take a look at some other countries just so you guys can get an idea. Let's go to China. In the last issue, we had 5,997 going to China. Let's take a look at what happened to some other countries here. Japan, 9,868. Korea, 2,170. Let's take a look at where Russia is. Russia is at 4,407. So there are a lot of SDRs going around to a lot of countries who don't necessarily need it. Now, let's talk about what the SDR is in its history. Now, this comes from the IMF itself. So let's take a quick read here. The SDR was created as a supplementary international reserve asset in the context of the Bretton Woods fixed exchange rate system. The collapse of the Bretton Woods system in 1973 and the shift of major currencies to floating exchange rate regimes lessened the reliance on the SDR as a global reserve asset. Nonetheless, SDR allocations can play a role in providing liquidity and supplementing member countries' official reserves, as was the case amid the global financial crisis that, again, I referred to just now. The SDR serves as the unit of account of the IMF and some other international organizations. The SDR is neither a currency nor a claim on the IMF. Rather, it is a potential claim on the freely usable currencies of IMF members. SDRs can be exchanged for these currencies. Now, let's talk about the original comparison with gold. This is from the IMF's website, remember. The SDR was initially defined as equivalent to 0.888671 grams of fine gold, which at the time was also equivalent to $1. After the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the SDR was redefined as a basket of currencies. Now, again, Mnuchin basically opposed this massive liquidity dump from the IMF, so he rejected this quote unquote paper gold that the IMF was going to send to basically all the countries that are part of the IMF, pretty much all 186. But as he mentioned, most of it would go to and actually, here's a bit of what he said here. He said 70% of the funds created through an SDR allocation, something akin to a central bank printing new money, would go to G20 countries, most of whom did not need it, while only 3% would go to low-income countries. And of course, we can also assume that a lot of those countries are competitors with the United States. So that's probably another reason why he didn't want that money to also go to them as well, especially given the fact that China also has been under the watchful eyes, as you can say, of the president in recent times. So what do you think about the SDR? Do you think it's actually a really cool idea? Do you think it's something that should be explored? Do you think that it shouldn't be explored? Was this the proper call? What do you think about a gold-backed reserve currency? In effect, what the U.S. used to have with the Bretton Woods system, where the SDR was trying to compete with that. Let me know in the comments section below. And thanks again. This is Black Bullion.